Hey everyone, and welcome to Dinar Today. I'm so glad you're here with me right now because what we're discussing today isn't just another update. This is one of those moments where the energy in this space feels fundamentally different. And if you've been following the Iraqi Dinar story for any length of time, you know exactly what I mean. You can sense when something is noise versus when something is genuine movement. It's in the tone of the conversations, the quality of the information, and the behavior of the institutions involved. Today, we're diving deep into breaking news surrounding the IQD RV, and specifically why major banking institutions appear to be positioning themselves ahead of what many in this community believed was a Sunday timeline. But before we go any further, I need you to do something for me. Take a breath. Slow down. This is not a moment for rushing or panic. This is a moment for clarity and understanding. Let me be crystal clear from the very beginning. Nothing I share with you today constitutes financial advice. I'm not your financial advisor. I'm not telling you to buy anything, sell anything, exchange anything, or take any specific action. My role here is simple. I'm sharing information, recognizing patterns, and offering perspective so that you can think critically and make informed decisions for yourself. There are no promises here, no guarantees. Just an honest, calm conversation about what appears to be unfolding in real time. That's the foundation we're building on today. Now, let's talk honestly about the journey we've all been on. For years, the Iraqi Dinar community has been flooded with dates. Sundays, Mondays, specific weekends, holidays, arbitrary deadlines, supposed windows of opportunity. And the vast majority of those dates came and went without anything the general public could see or verify. That reality has left many people exhausted. Some are angry, others have become deeply skeptical. And all of those reactions are completely understandable and valid. When you've been told that something is imminent dozens of times over the course of years, it's natural to build up emotional armor. But here's what I want you to understand about this current moment. What's happening right now is different. And it's not different because someone picked another date on a calendar. It's different because of behavior. And in the world of global finance, behavior always reveals the truth long before official announcements are made. Right now, we're seeing concrete signs that major banking institutions are positioning themselves ahead of what the broader community expected to be the normal timeline. And that matters more than most people realize. Banks don't move early for entertainment. They don't reposition their systems, adjust their staffing levels, or increase their operational readiness on a whim or because of internet rumors. Banks are fundamentally unemotional entities. They don't chase speculation. They don't get caught up in hype. What they do is prepare for outcomes they believe are probable enough to warrant resource allocation. And when major banks begin moving before the general public expects them to, it typically signals one very specific thing. They don't want to be caught unprepared. They're positioning to be ready, not reactive. Now, I want to be extremely careful with my language here because precision matters, especially when emotions are running high. When we say that banks are moving ahead of a timeline, that does not mean everything has already happened behind closed doors. It doesn't mean the RV has been publicly announced and you missed it. It doesn't mean you should drop everything and run to your local bank branch right now. What it means is that internal operational readiness appears to be accelerating ahead of what was being publicly discussed or anticipated. And that's a significant distinction. Most people only ever see the public-facing side of the financial world. The official announcements, the rate boards and exchange offices, the news headlines. But long before any of that becomes visible to the general public, there's an entire quiet internal world where systems are stress-tested, permissions and authorities are adjusted, compliance protocols are reviewed, and operational processes are refined. That's the world that major banks actually inhabit day to day. And that's precisely where we're seeing movement being noticed right now by those who understand what to look for. Let's take a step back for a moment and talk about why Sunday timelines became such a focal point in this community in the first place. In the world of global finance, weekends carry special significance because that's when major system updates and transitions can be implemented with minimal disruption to active trading and public transactions. Markets are closed. Volume is low. It's the ideal window for technical changes. So over time, people in the Dinar community began to operate under the assumption that if something major was going to happen with the IQD, it would most likely happen on a Sunday. And to be fair, there's logic to that thinking. Many significant currency adjustments and financial system updates throughout history have indeed occurred over weekends. But here's what's crucial to understand. That's a preference, not an ironclad rule. It's a tendency based on operational convenience, not a requirement. And preferences change when urgency changes. When banks assess that waiting for a perfect calendar moment could create operational problems or leave them at a competitive disadvantage, they move early. They don't wait for the theoretically ideal Sunday if current conditions demand earlier preparation. That's exactly what makes this current update so important and worth your attention. Another critical thing we need to address is how loosely the term RV gets used across the internet and social media. For some people, RV means a dramatic overnight public rate change where you wake up one morning and the dinar is suddenly worth exponentially more. For others, it means a gradual normalization process. For still others, it refers to internal valuation changes that might not be immediately visible to currency holders. And for banking institutions specifically, RV often refers to operational readiness to handle a potential change, which is distinctly different from the announcement of that change itself. So, when we discuss banks moving ahead of schedule, we're talking about readiness and preparation, not fireworks and public celebrations. And honestly, that's actually a positive sign. Sustainable financial transitions are built on solid preparation, not theatrical announcement. Let's redirect our focus to Iraq itself for a moment, because this entire story originates there, and we can't lose sight of that foundation. Iraq has spent the better part of the last decade systematically rebuilding its financial infrastructure. And I'm not talking about superficial patches or cosmetic fixes. I'm talking about fundamental redesign, banking sector reform, enhanced compliance with international standards, increased financial transparency, development of sophisticated digital infrastructure, alignment with global financial systems and protocols. All of this has been happening quietly and methodically while people online argued about specific dates and rates. These structural steps matter infinitely more than any rumor ever could. They represent real, measurable progress that creates the foundation for genuine currency stability and value. Now, when you combine Iraq's documented internal progress with a global financial system that is currently under tremendous stress from inflation, debt levels, geopolitical tensions, and shifting power dynamics, something interesting begins to emerge. Stable, resource-backed, actively reforming economies start to look increasingly attractive to international financial institutions and investors. Not perfect by any means, but attractive relative to alternatives. And Iraq fits that profile more convincingly now than it has at any point in the past 2 decades. Major banks absolutely notice these macro trends. They analyze them, they model scenarios, and they position accordingly. Another crucial piece of this puzzle is institutional risk management. Major banks have an almost pathological aversion to being caught off guard. If there's even a reasonable probability that currency conditions could shift, they prepare in advance. They don't wait for absolute certainty, because absolute certainty in finance essentially never exists before an event occurs. Instead, they prepare for probability. And the probability of meaningful change related to the Iraqi dinar is higher right now than it has been in a very long time based on multiple converging factors. This is precisely why you're hearing language about movement ahead of anticipated schedules. It's not because someone violated protocols or broke rules. It's because the underlying environment and risk assessment have shifted substantially. Let me speak directly for a moment to those of you who have been holding dinar for years or even over a decade. This part is specifically important for you. You've heard big claims before. You've experienced disappointment before, probably multiple times. So your natural instinct right now might be to dismiss this update entirely as just more of the same noise you've heard 1,000 times. And I completely understand that protective instinct, but I want you to be very careful not to confuse healthy skepticism with willful blindness. Skepticism asks intelligent questions. It demands evidence. It maintains standards. Blindness, on the other hand, ignores legitimate signals simply because past signals turned out to be false. What's happening in the current environment is not loud or dramatic. It's subtle and technical. And subtle is almost always how genuinely significant developments begin in the financial world. The loud, obvious moments come later, after the foundation has already been laid quietly. One of the single biggest mistakes that people make when following currency stories like this is assuming that if something doesn't happen in a publicly visible way, then nothing is happening at all. That assumption is almost never accurate in finance. By the time the general public sees an announcement or a rate change or a policy shift, that development is already old news internally. It's been discussed, modeled, prepared for, and implemented behind the scenes, sometimes for weeks or months. So when informed observers say that banks are moving early or ahead of schedule, what they're actually communicating is that internal processes and preparations are visibly active. And in the world of banking, that matters tremendously because it indicates resource allocation, which banks only do when probability justifies investment. Now let's address fear directly because I can feel it in the messages and comments. And fear spreads incredibly fast during moments of uncertainty like this. Some people are afraid they're going to miss out on a life-changing opportunity. Others are terrified they're going to make a critical mistake. Still, others are afraid to allow themselves to hope again because the pain of past disappointments was so acute. All of these fears are deeply human and completely valid. But here's what I need you to understand. Fear should never be the driving force behind your decisions, especially financial ones. If something is genuinely real and legitimate, it will not require panic or rushed decisions. No authentic financial event that affects millions of people across the globe is designed to trick them, rush them, or punish those who take time to think clearly. That would instantly destroy the trust that is absolutely foundational to currency value. So if you're encountering messages or sources that are creating artificial urgency without providing genuine clarity, that's your signal to slow down and step back. Real progress in finance explains itself over time through consistent evidence. It doesn't shout. It doesn't demand immediate action. It unfolds. Another important nuance to understand is that banks don't all move at the same speed or with the same level of aggression. Some institutions are faster and more willing to position early. Others are more conservative and cautious, preferring to wait for additional confirmation. Some wait until they see peer institutions move first. So when we hear reports that major banks are moving ahead of schedule, that doesn't mean every single bank branch in every location is doing the exact same thing simultaneously. What it means is that leadership at significant institutions and their core operational systems are adjusting and preparing, and that adjustment process is typically invisible to the general public until it reaches a critical threshold. Let's revisit the Sunday timeline concept once more because this creates a lot of confusion and misplaced expectations. Just because something was anticipated or expected to happen on a Sunday does not mean it cannot happen before that Sunday or after it. Timelines in banking and finance are planning tools, not binding promises. And when underlying conditions change, plans adapt accordingly. What matters far more than the specific day of the week is the actual readiness level of the systems and institutions involved. And based on available information right now, readiness appears to be increasing measurably. Now, I want to be absolutely clear about something because clarity protects people from making errors. The fact that banks may be moving ahead of an anticipated timeline does not mean you personally need to do anything today or this week. For the vast majority of people following the story, the correct action right now is actually no action beyond continued awareness. Watch developments, listen to credible sources, stay informed through reliable channels, keep your documentation safe and organized. Keep your emotions steady and balanced. That's it. That's the appropriate response. If you ever find yourself feeling pressure to rush into action, that feeling itself is your signal to pause and reassess. Legitimate opportunities provide time for thoughtful response. Another factor worth highlighting is that global finance is moving faster now than it did even a decade ago. Advanced digital systems, real-time settlement capabilities, and deeply interconnected markets mean that once key decisions are made at high levels, the implementation of those decisions can happen remarkably quickly. That's precisely why early preparation matters so much to major institutions. And that's why banks prepare well in advance whenever possible. Preparation does not equal completion or finalization, but it absolutely signals intent and assessed probability. And in banking, intent backed by resource allocation matters greatly. Now let's talk about trust. Because trust has been severely damaged in this space over the years. And that damage hasn't come exclusively from Iraq or its government. It's come from widespread misinformation, chronic exaggeration, unrealistic expectations, and sources that prioritized clicks and engagement over accuracy. Rebuilding trust takes substantial time and consistent honesty. And part of that rebuilding process requires being straightforward about what we actually know versus what we don't know. What we know with confidence is that Iraq has made measurable, documented progress in financial reform over the past several years. What we know is that global economic conditions are shifting in ways that could favor resource-backed currencies. What we know is that major banks are highly sensitive to timing and risk management. What we know is that internal institutional movement typically precedes public announcements by weeks or sometimes months. What we don't know with certainty is exact dates, exact rates, or exact final outcomes. Anyone claiming absolute certainty on those specific elements is not being honest with you or possibly with themselves. But uncertainty does not mean nothing is happening. Uncertainty means we are currently in a transition phase. And transitions are inherently uncomfortable. They feel messy and unclear. They don't follow clean, linear storylines. But transitions are also exactly where meaningful change actually occurs. I want to talk about patience for a moment because patience is so often misunderstood, especially in spaces like this where people have been waiting for years. Patience is not passive inaction. Patience is not giving up or checking out. Real patience is maintaining readiness without succumbing to panic. It's holding awareness without falling into obsession. It's trusting your own ability to recognize and respond appropriately when the actual time comes. If you made it this far in the Iraqi Dinar story, through all the ups and downs and disappointments and false starts, you already possess patience. You've already demonstrated it. Don't abandon that strength now just because things are finally starting to show signs of genuine movement. Stay the course. Another element that matters significantly right now is understanding how banks communicate. Banks communicate very differently in internal channels than they do in public statements. Internal communication is cautious, technical, precise, and quiet. Public communication is delayed, carefully polished, legally reviewed, and simplified for general consumption. What we are seeing right now is more of that internal operational side beginning to leak into public awareness through various channels. And that's a key reason why the current environment feels different to those paying close attention. This doesn't mean classified secrets are being inappropriately disclosed. It means readiness and preparation are reaching levels where they become increasingly difficult to hide completely. Let me share something that might surprise some of you. If absolutely nothing were happening, if this were truly a dead story with no legitimate foundation, there would be silence. Not debate, not movement, not preparation activities, not institutional positioning, just silence. Dead stories don't create preparation behavior in major banking institutions. The fact that there is measurable activity, ongoing discussion at serious levels, and documented positioning tells you that something remains very much alive. You can argue about timelines. You can debate rates. You can question specific details, but you cannot reasonably argue that nothing is happening when observable preparation is occurring. I want to circle back to the emotional dimension of this because it's genuinely important and affects decision-making quality. Some of you listening right now are excited and hopeful. Some of you are nervous and anxious. Some of you are just tired and worn out from years of waiting. All of those emotional states are completely okay and valid. Just don't allow emotions to make decisions for you. You don't win in the long term by reacting impulsively to every piece of news. You win by responding thoughtfully and strategically. If you're hearing this update and feeling overwhelmed or overstimulated, I encourage you to step back from the information flow, turn off the noise for a day or two, come back later with a clearer head and fresh perspective. This is not a 1-hour window of opportunity that will close forever if you blink. This is a process that will unfold over time with multiple opportunities to engage appropriately. As we continue moving forward through this transition period, expect to encounter more mixed messages from various sources. Some will be accurate and helpful, some won't be accurate at all. Some will be exaggerated for attention. Some will be delayed and outdated by the time you hear them. That's completely normal during transition phases. Your responsibility is not to believe everything you hear or dismiss everything you hear. Your responsibility is to observe patterns over time and weigh credibility of sources. And the pattern that's emerging right now, when you step back and look at the bigger picture, is movement, preparation, positioning. These are meaningful signals. Before I wrap up today's update, I want to remind you of something fundamental that sometimes gets lost in the day-to-day speculation. The Iraqi Dinar story was never really about a single dramatic moment. It was always about a nation systematically rebuilding itself after decades of conflict and sanctions and reintegrating into the global financial system as a credible participant. That process takes years. It requires patience, investment, reform, and sustained effort. And when such a process finally reaches critical mass, things do begin to move more quickly, but they don't move recklessly. There are still procedures, protocols, and systems that must be respected. We may genuinely be closer to that critical mass point than we've ever been before. That doesn't mean tomorrow morning changes your life. It means the environment is shifting. And the environment always comes before the outcome. The environment creates the conditions. The outcome follows. I want to sincerely thank you for taking the time to listen all the way through this update. This topic deserves calm analysis, not chaos. It deserves thoughtful consideration, not hype. It deserves awareness, not fear. If you found genuine value in this conversation today, I'd appreciate your support for the Dinar Today channel in whatever way feels right to you. Subscribe if you haven't already. Share with others who might benefit. Engage thoughtfully in the comments. But more than anything else, take care of yourself. Protect your peace of mind. Stay grounded in reality. We are not in a moment that requires panic. We're in a moment that rewards preparation and steadiness. And preparation rewards those who remain calm and observant. Thank you so much for being here with me today. I genuinely appreciate each and every one of you who takes this journey seriously and approaches it with integrity. I'll see you very soon in the next update. Until then, stay informed, stay balanced, and stay ready.